Howdy everybody. I am making a video today on the new garden beds that we're going to be putting in here on the homestead to double up on the existing beds that we have. And today's a perfect example of a day I was getting to work and forgot about filming and kind of just, I enjoy not filming all the time. So it's been a little bit of a challenge to just get the camera in my hand every time I'm out here, which it's good to find a balance, but I also like to show you guys what we're doing. So thank you for watching and supporting. So here's our existing beds. I've been really happy with the field irrigation kit from Farmer's Friend. It's a 100-foot line that has 5 sprinklers, and that actually was perfect to nail this whole bed and the mounds that will have herbs in them and the apple trees. So that's been perfect. And then I went ahead and got one more kit that's going to go down this side. So we're going to stop here at the well house. Another reason that we laid out the property the way we did, after spending that first year of kind of studying the light and water flow and all that good stuff, it was important to put the beds close to the well house. So luckily we have a port on here that avoids it having to run through the house, so we can pull right from the well pump. Eventually it'll become trickier to kind of get that water run to different parts of the property. I do have probably 350 feet worth of hoses out to the front orchard to get some irrigation out there. Now that the trees are in their first or second year, not as much watering required. We had a really good, healthy, wet spring, so I'm not too concerned there. But as the orchard out there, those rows become filled with more flowering plants and herbs and stuff, I'd like to have some supplemental water out there as needed, especially in the late summer, fall, when it gets really dry here. So anyway, really happy with the watering situation here. And then we're going to do something very similar on this side. So I just wanted to show you guys, here's our beautiful little imprint of where the black plastic was for the past couple weeks. It's effectively suppressed and kind of drowned out all the grass and weeds. Obviously there's some more that are showing here on the edge that I maybe didn't get, but that's okay because we're going to line this now with cardboard and then top it with 6 to 8 inches of compost. And for this side we're going to do long beds, so probably close to 75 feet runs of 4.5 feet wide beds. I know standard market garden is 30-inch beds, but I just kind of like doing it my own way. And this is a method that I found from Charles Dowding. And since we're not on a large scale here, this is my home garden and overflow for the farm stand, I kind of want to just do it in that way. I've been able to find row cover that works for those 4.5 foot beds, and then also the arches to cover with the row cover, the metal bands. I've been able to find stuff that fits that as well. So I'm going to plan for 3 rows with maybe 3 or 4 walkways, and then we'll do the same thing and line it with fallen limbs and logs that I found around the property to make a nice walkway. So I'll kind of show you guys as this develops today. I'll try to have the camera on and running, but the first step is going to be to get the cardboard in here. Actually, before that, I'm going to go with the tractor and mow one pass, just to knock down what's here. There's really not much, but just I'll get as close as I can to the edge here. I should have overlapped that plastic, but it was during when I was laying this mulch path, so it didn't happen. So edges are always the most difficult. So I'm gonna get that cardboard tucked up under there as best I can. And then in the years to come, obviously, even with these mulch paths, the first year, because I didn't line with landscape fabric, try to limit the plastic use. There's already weeds popping up, not a big deal. I'm gonna layer that as often as I can with mulch. And over time, as that continues to break down and suffocate the underlying weeds, it'll be effective. So it just takes time, consistency, and monitoring that whole deal. So I'm just going to continue to explore this with you guys, but I was really happy to see the suppression here, and I've got some more plastic to peel back, but I'll show you more. Okay, so we've got that mowed down. I just set the tractor mower down to one of the lower settings just to get that as tightly down to the ground as we could. And that looks great. Here's a comparison to our regular lawn and where the beds are going to go. So I'm excited about that. And this is something I wish I had done with all the beds. I did pretty close to this with these beds here. Reason being is this is going to limit the amount of time you spend battling the weeds, especially this no-dig method. and I'll get into this a little bit. But the old way of farming and some practices that we really have to try to get away from is tillage, and a lot of what's being done on large scale farming. And the reason is when you're tilling the soil, you're breaking up that life in the soil. You're stirring up the weed seeds. You're just kind of starting over every year and depleting that soil. And then what's happening is a lot of farmers are using these synthetic or chemical-based fertilizers, which are just stripping the soil of the microbial, true living soil that we have. And then that, in turn, brings in more weed seeds every year, more thriving weeds, because weeds come in to replenish the soil and bring in the nutrients that are required. So weeds really aren't a bad thing. They just are something that obviously gets in the way of farming. But, the weeds are coming in, the soil's losing its vitality and its life, and obviously we have food that's laden with chemicals and fertilizers and all that stuff, which is obviously wreaking havoc on our health. So something that we can do on a small scale, and they're finding ways to do it on larger scales, is the no-dig, no-till method, where you're basically not interrupting the life that's under this soil that's been here, the food web, or the soil web, the microbe web, and the structure that's there. You're lining it with biodegradable cardboard that's going to break down over a span of a season, or other type of organic paper products that don't have ink and tape and all that different stuff. And then on top of that, you're layering it with 6 to 8 inches of compost just the first year, just to give it that nice thick layer that's going to suppress any remaining weed seeds and weeds to come up. And then year after year in the fall, you're just going to add a small 1 to 2 inch layer of compost on top of those beds. And then obviously in your rows, I use leaves. You can use mulch, anything you want to keep layering that. And you're going to fight way less weeds than if you till. Tilling just brings all that back up to the surface, and it's encouraging those weeds to grow because the soil needs to rebuild and restructure itself. So it's an old way of thinking. And then of course, fertilizing with chemicals and synthetic fertilizers is just not the way to go, I believe. So this is something to keep fooling with and educate yourself on. But it's a practice here at Hawkins Farm and Harvest, which I'll show you guys the website we're about to launch this week for the community. But it's a practice we really take seriously here. It's something I'm hell-bent on doing with these beds in our garden, and hopefully healthier produce for everybody. So I've got my compost ready to go here. And then as I was saying, what I didn't do with these first beds was I wasn't as diligent about covering those grasses and weeds in the first place and suffocating them. So I've had to do a little more work weeding each year with this one, just as it's creeping up through and layering more cardboard and kind of going backwards a little bit. And eventually, as you pluck enough of those, it's going to start to suffocate the roots and they're going to stop trying. But it's going to take some time and continuing to add to those beds. Whereas these ones, I've really done no weeding with these beds since they've been laid, and we're coming up to, over 6 months. I occasionally pull the smallest little weed that comes up from being blown into the bed. Obviously, when I'm mowing around these beds, I don't blow anything into the beds. And you pluck those weeds when they're small. That's really good practice so that you're not obviously letting them get away from you. But check out the no-dig method with Charles Dowding. Obviously, there's a lot of education out there about no-till. But for small-scale farmers, it's an absolute no-brainer. There's the initial upfront here, which really I don't think is that different than the time spent tilling your ground. But you're going to avoid all the weed headaches. You're going to have healthier soil. You're going to have healthier produce. And you're doing something for our planet. You're working with nature instead of going against, which is really something we advocate here. This wonderful, beautiful earth, all these natural things that have been working for millennial, they obviously know what they're doing, and it's our job to work alongside them and to encourage that. And we're going to have much better results if we work in that way and replicate what nature's already doing. So I'm just at the beginning of this journey. I appreciate you guys following along. But if I can do it, as somebody who just, jumped into this venture a year or two ago, I've been educating myself on YouTube for many years, but there's so much you can learn out there. And if I can do it, you guys can do this in your backyard. It doesn't have to be at this scale. with a little bit of compost, which you can make yourself with some of the resources in your community. And with a little bit of effort, you can have your own healthy vegetable gardens that are no dig, no till, and thriving with life. So I'm excited to continue to show you guys in the years ahead, but let's get back to it. I'm gonna lay some cardboard, then get these the compost in, and we should be cooking. So my wife Sierra is very excited to see the plastic get pulled back today. I told her, of course, it's not a long-term deal, but it's very effective in the beginning to get that grass killed down, especially this time of year when things aren't growing. Well, they're just starting to because of spring, but I put it on a few weeks ago and it was helpful to just get that down as soon as possible. So with a thing like this, obviously not everything's going to look 100% all of the time, and that's okay. It's a work in progress. But here's all the cardboard I've collected. I found a really great resource finally for clean, no ink, no tape cardboard, and that was at the local post office. They have weekly drops of very large cardboard, so that'll be a great place to continue getting that. And I'm going to go ahead and line that and then slowly peel this back, finish this all the way to the existing beds. And then back here, I'm going to lay plastic one more time on this side, kind of in this area here to the back of the greenhouse, perpendicular, to start some beds there, which will then be, I'm going to put a cat tunnel over that. So that'll happen eventually where tomatoes, cucumbers, and some of that stuff will be growing inside for a longer growing season and protected from some of the elements. Those plants that don't love a lot of water on the foliage, summer plants, cucumbers, tomatoes, eggplant, peppers, things like that, and they like the heat. So trying to keep everything oriented here close. And then I've got a new wash bin back there behind the greenhouse, and I'm going to set up, I'm actually going to turn one of these long pallets into a kind of drying rack for things like carrots, beets, and whatnot. And then the lettuces will get washed in the garage in a bubbler and dried on drying racks inside, more sensitive plants. And obviously cold storage is another big thing that I'm working on. I don't want to jump right into the cool bot yet because it's a big investment, but I'm sure it's going to happen sooner than later just to avoid losing some quality produce. So yeah, okay, I'm going to get started, lay some of this cardboard, and we'll keep you guys posted. We've got our first row just about lined here with the cardboard, and we've gone all the way up to the well house here. And what I did was I took that cardboard and I overlapped a good bit onto my mulch path. Eventually I can lay more mulch on top of that all the way down, but that's just to suppress that extra row of weeds and grass there. And then scoop of compost all the way down, and then I'll start here going down again to the second row. And usually what I'll do, and I'll show you guys, is I'm going to do 4.5 feet here. I'll do these scoops of compost, and then I'll do another row here, and then in between I'll layer the leaves after I do that. So I'll have to get the tape measure. I'm actually waiting on a new garden rake from our local seed and feed. So I'll probably just lay these piles today. I actually hurt my neck gardening with the baby. I had her strapped on my chest and stood up too fast or whatever and pulled my neck. So I've been out of commission for a couple days, at least with heavy lifting. So I probably won't rake for the next couple days, but at least wanted to get this going. And I want to obviously get this done before any of the grass and the weeds start showing up again. So today I'll probably lay 2 rows, maybe 3, I don't know, I think just 2, so I can reach the tractor over and get the leaves in the rows. But I'll get the tape measure out and at least line this so I know where my 4.5 feet mark is. And then usually 1 scoop's enough to stretch me 4.5 feet. And usually I would say 4 to 6 inches, maybe a little bit more than that as far as depth for the compost. So yeah, there it is. There's our first row, and that's going to look really nice with these 2 beds and the pathway between. And then with these beds too, you never have to really be afraid. Obviously compaction with heavy machinery and tools can be an issue. It is not great for growing a lot of different things, but with no dig, when you're laying this on, once I get this raked out, amendments in, if I'm using amendments or anything like that, I'll go ahead and actually walk on the path to give it that initial compaction. And it's just tightening up the soil so that the plants can thrive, because you plant right into that. Obviously you don't want your compost steaming or anything like that to burn the roots, but once it's ready and sat for 6 months to a year or whatnot, you're ready to throw that on. But yeah, that initial walk on to just flatten everything down, and then water to get everything kind of tight. so you don't have a lot of wash away. And we'll get into some more no-dig methods later, I'm sure, but just something I wanted to mention too. When you're harvesting these plants from no-dig, you're really trying to eliminate as much of the digging as possible when you're harvesting. So a lot of times you're cutting plants at the roots, harvesting at the roots, and leaving the roots in the soil to decompose. It's kind of bifold. It's allowing that nitrogen to leach back into the soil, feed your future succession plantings. And then also that breakdown of the roots allows for aerated pathways, for oxygen, obviously, and then for your microbes and all your worms and bugs and things like that to live. So you're turning that soil into a thriving ecosystem that's continuing to grow on itself versus tilling and digging and interrupting and having that restart. So Charles Dowding actually does a really interesting, if you check him out on YouTube, he has had a comparison bed of a no-dig and a tilled bed that he basically keeps all the other variables the same, plants in those each year, and does some different succession planting to show the harvest bounty from each bed and the benefits of the no-dig method. It's been really cool to watch. So I implore you to seek him out if that's something you're interested in. I've learned most of what I know from him and other YouTubers. YouTube is a wonderful asset. Hopefully I'll be a part of that for somebody who's looking to get started with this. But I kind of went on a tangent there. So we'll get these down. We'll do the initial compaction. We'll get the rows lined, do the initial watering. And then I think I mentioned, I have a farmer's friend, another field irrigation kit coming to do this whole pathway. So once I get this lined out to this edge over here, then I'll get the rest of the plastic pulled up, connect this to the greenhouse bed back there, and then I probably just cleanly lay the plastic one more time where that cat tunnel is going to be and try to start to clear up this area. Everything in the greenhouse that I have for summer is going to go on this side and get planted pretty immediately. Probably by the time I'm done with this, it'll be time to start planting those. But all your summer beans, squash, watermelon, even some corn that I've tested in some CD60 trays just to see if I can transplant. And the reason is that a lot of those summer crops are very sprawling, and most of them like a lot of water too. So I'm going to need the space. So I did the longer beds here for those and going to let things run. I've already filled the majority of the beds. Obviously they're small transplants in these beds. I have a handful left, and I have some things that I'm going to throw in there. But these long beds are going to be really helpful for those sprawling summer crops. Obviously, if you've seen my first video, there's plans for more beds on the property. It's an ever-evolving plan, but I'm excited to start here, get this kind of situated, manage my weeds, manage my planting and plotting for each year. This is plenty of room to grow some very valuable crops for the homestead, preserved food for my family, and then also for our farm stand and for sale. But really something that is important to me is making use of the land that we have. Obviously, I'm very blessed to have the time and energy and inspiration to do this, but you can do this on a small scale in using the yard and the lawn that you have. I think there's beauty in kind of making use of some of that yard space, especially since we have so many lawns, and it takes a lot of time to mow those lawns and to keep those lawns looking nice. So really encouraging the natural ecosystem, letting all these natural wildflowers and even some of the weeds and classified weeds thrive in those areas. It's going to help supply extra nutrients in the soil. It's going to give it biodiversity. It's going to give it resilience, which is another big discussion, is getting away from that monoculture, large-scale farming, and bringing in the biodiversity to allow for resilience, which controls your pest population, and you're bringing in all the pollinators and the other good insects to thrive in those areas, and not just feast on your produce, but to work on some of the other pests and whatnot. So again, I'm getting on a tangent, but there's a lot of good stuff with this type of gardening and dig, and obviously you can go down a rabbit hole with all of this stuff. But the goals of the property are to kind of make use of this space, make it productive for our community. Obviously, it's fulfilling my dreams of just having some fun and getting to lay out a property like this and do this type of homestead lifestyle. So again, you don't have to do it on a scale this size. I'm obviously not even doing anything that big, but you can easily take these principles and apply them to a smaller backyard garden. And before you go doing a raised bed, and I would still call these a permanent raised bed, but what I'm referring to is before you go and buy lumber, treated lumber, and build a raised bed, I would encourage you to look at this no-dig method. I think there's a lot of benefits to doing it this way. And with that lumber, obviously you've got treated lumber, you've got chemicals coming in. Eventually that wood's gonna rot. And on top of that, the rotting wood and the moisture retention in the sidewalls of those beds is allowing for slugs and other pests to kind of creep in there. So don't be afraid of planting right into the ground using this cardboard compost method. Each year, just topping it off, and you'll have some great results. And you can make it look pretty. Obviously, you can do even more than I'm doing here, but I think this is a great way of just using mulch and different things to kind of keep everything clean and tight. So explore your options, do your research, and always reach out if you have questions. I'd love to help you guys. But I'm going to keep going here and get another row done.